I'm basically on my own personal war against relativism. I think it's totally contrived, and the only reason we lean into it is because it's sort of the easiest way to balance things as individuals. Also, the path of least resistance is taking the first off-ramp possible to avoid fighting upstream to the truth. The truth is certainly complex, but as I've said before, the truth is relational, not relative. Giving all points of view, all ethical principles, all epistemological status conditions equal weight is to do more to do nothing. To really work hard to erase deterministic power indications, to maintain a cloudy fog that obscures any call to action, any accountability for poor behavior, any responsibility to take action. The one good thing relativism has going for it is if everyone was a relativist, we'd have world peace because nobody would care enough to fight about anything. Of course, we'd have no motivation to pursue justice or fairness either. I'm not saying we maintain conflict in order to maintain interest in justice and fairness. Just that we do more than insist on a single principle because seemingly that's all we can do. One concept at a time. I've made many videos about relativism and many sections in videos about it. All I can say is that it serves the individual. It's an easy path for the individual to deal with the world. And it's funny because I think relativistic people are actually absolutists, because they sort of insist that everything must be perfect in order for there to be anything at all to hold on to. So since I have 99% of this principle or proposition is true, but I have these few exceptions, well, now that you have these exceptions, you must throw out the 99% of what you know because it's not this ideal perfection that they're seeking. And then years of doing that generates this situation where now they believe that nothing is anything and nothing can be known and everything is in flux and it's relative. And then that moves on to moral relativism, where it's like, well, you can't judge people because you're not from their culture. But the reality is there's a universal, human universality. I mean, we all die. I mean, in the end, human universality is going to revolve around the quantifying of I'm present or I'm absent. Either I'm alive or I'm dead. I'm 1 or I'm 0. We all share that. It's absolutely universal. Nobody escapes death. So in the end, they have their perfection, but doing a lot of time avoiding the reality that death and quantification of the individual in the moment is a universal factor that isn't compromised, and it is shared between all of us. And death also, there's a spectrum. Keeping somebody from surviving is, a certain percentage of killing them. So you can look at things like that where universally there is something to do. And when we can see other people, keeping others from surviving or genocide, when we see a certain group of people destroying another group of people, using their power to an advantage, we know that's wrong. We don't say that that's relative. We don't say what Hitler did is, Hitler's just a crazy guy. We know it's wrong because he has no right to decide that other groups of people have no right to exist. And that goes for individuals, that goes for groups over individuals. It goes for leaders over other leaders, states over states. You don't really have the right to decide, but life puts us in a situation where conflict is inevitable. Like land, land is limited, land is finite. So people move around land, and so there's going to be conflict over land because, two groups of people can't occupy the same land. That's just a given. So that's going to generate conflict. Physical reality generates the conditions by which conflict is inevitable. And that's why we need regulation, we need control, we need participation so that people avoid the inevitable conflict inherent in our reality. So that's why relativism can do that in a simple sense, in that it helps the individual moderate their more extreme tendencies, but it does nothing for the group. Relativism is a philosophical position that asserts that points of view have no absolute truth or validity, but rather only relative subjective value according to differences in perception and consideration. It's often contrasted with absolutism, which holds that there are universal, immutable truths. Here's a breakdown of the key ideas. Rejection of absolutes. There are no universal truths or right or wrong answers that apply to everyone, everywhere. Importance of perspective. How you see things depends on your background, experiences, and the society you live in. There are various forms of relativism, including moral relativism. The belief that morality is not universal and that moral codes vary from one society or culture to another. According to moral relativism, what is considered morally right or wrong can differ between cultures or historical periods, and no single standard of morality is superior to others. Cultural relativism. The principle that an individual's beliefs and activities should be understood by others in terms of that individual's own culture. It suggests that all cultural beliefs are equally valid and that truth itself is relative, depending on the cultural environment. Epistemic relativism. This focuses on knowledge. There's no single way of knowing something for sure, and different cultures have their own ways of validating knowledge. Aesthetic relativism. The view that the perception of beauty or artistic value is relative to the individual or culture. What is considered beautiful or artistically significant can vary greatly between different people and societies. Relativism can be a contentious topic, as it challenges the notion of objective standards in areas such as morality, truth, and aesthetics, and can lead to debates about the nature of knowledge, belief, and reality. Relativism, while influential in various philosophical and cultural debates, faces several criticisms. These critiques come from proponents of absolutism, objectivism, and other philosophical positions that argue for the existence of universal truths or standards. Here are some common criticisms. Self-refutation. Critics argue that relativism is self-refuting. If all truths are relative, then the statement all truths are relative must also be relative, which undermines its own validity. This paradox suggests that relativism cannot consistently claim universal application. Moral inconsistency. Moral relativism is often criticized for potentially justifying harmful practices. If all moral codes are equally valid, it becomes difficult to condemn practices like slavery, genocide, or discrimination, as these might be considered acceptable in some cultures or societies. Cognitive relativism and knowledge. Cognitive relativism, which suggests that truth depends on individual perspectives, is criticized for undermining the concept of objective knowledge. This can lead to skepticism about scientific facts, historical events, and logical reasoning, making it challenging to establish any common ground for understanding reality. You really have to try to be clueless. It's much easier just to let it be, trust me. Cultural relativism and progress. Critics argue that cultural relativism can hinder social progress and reform. If all cultural practices are seen as equally valid, it becomes difficult to advocate for changes that improve human rights, gender equality, or other social justice issues within different cultures. Aesthetic relativism and art criticism. Aesthetic relativism, which posits that beauty and artistic value are entirely subjective, is challenged for making meaningful criticism and appreciation of art difficult. If all aesthetic judgments are equally valid, it becomes hard to distinguish between high and low quality in art and to foster artistic standards. Ethical relativism and decision-making. Ethical relativism can complicate decision-making, especially in multicultural and international contexts. If there are no universal ethical standards, it can be challenging to resolve conflict or establish fair practices in areas like business, law, and international relations. Pragmatic concerns. Some critics argue that relativism is impractical for everyday life. People need consistent standards to make decisions, form policies, and create cohesive societies. Relativism's emphasis on context-dependent truths can create confusion and instability. Relativism isn't even a thing to me. Chains of contingency can account for everything, which tells you that nothing is equal. Everything is inherently unequal. If your reply is that that condition of reality requires us to soften it, I'd agree for some areas, such as aesthetics, or just for individuals who have, hard, sharp edges. Relativism can help you moderate your more extreme positions. But in the end, it's an intellectual muddling. It's like intellectual weed. The second you buy into it, you fall asleep on the couch watching Saturday morning cartoons from the 80s. We need to be awake. We need to realize when injustices are being perpetuated against individuals, against groups, and we need to soldier up and handle it for humanity's sake, for all humans. Yeah, we don't need to do these things for relativists because they're not the ones causing problems typically, but in the end, the whole world's not going to be relativistic. Injustices will happen because that conflict is inherent in our reality, as I had stated earlier in the video. If you like this kind of philosophical subject matter, help us out by liking the video and subscribing to